It feels like we live in an era where where volume is everything.
Hmm.
It's the age of the personal brand, the loud voice, frankly, the big ego. There's this idea that if you're not shouting about what you've done, you just don't matter.
That's so true. It dominates everything. But today, we're going to challenge that, well, completely. We are doing a deep dive into a quiet strength that gets so overlooked and misunderstood.
Humility.
Humanity. And our sources argue it's one of the most powerful qualities a person can have, especially today.
And what's interesting is the sources aren't just saying humility is, a nice thing to have. They're making a case that it's a real, tangible advantage.
Competitive advantage, yeah.
So our mission for you, the listener, is kind of twofold. First, let's get past that old idea of humility as weakness.
Right.
And second, let's understand how it actually works as this dynamic balance. We want to show you the practical side of it, especially for things like personal growth, resilience, and real leadership.
And to do that, we have to start by clearing out the baggage. I mean, that old school definition of humility, meekness, making yourself small, that's not what we're talking about at all.
Okay, let's tackle that misconception head on then, because I think when people hear humility at work, they think it means they have to hide their talents or, never take credit for anything.
Yeah, that they have to shrink.
Right.
And our source material just flat out rejects that definition. It's really clear that true humility isn't a performance. It's an accurate self-assessment. It's a balance.
A balance. Okay, that's a key word. So if it's an equilibrium, what are the two sides we're trying to balance?
Well, the first part is knowing your strengths and knowing them without arrogance.
Without arrogance.
So you acknowledge your skills, what you've achieved, your value.
Yeah.
You should be objective about what you bring to the table.
That part seems pretty straightforward. But I'm guessing the other side of the scale is where it gets tricky for most people.
Absolutely. The second element is knowing your limits and, crucially, understanding those limits without shame.
Without shame. That's the hard part.
It is. It means you can see a gap in your knowledge or admit a mistake and not feel like a complete failure. The real trick is holding both in your mind at once, your strengths and your limits, without judging either one.
But wait, how do you do that without it turning into, imposter syndrome, where you're only focused on the limits and you just feel like a fraud all the time?
That's such a great question. And the sources say the key is that word, shame. If you see your limits with shame, you either hide them, which is a disaster waiting to happen, or you let that shame define you.
Which is self-sabotage.
Exactly. Humility takes the emotion out of it. It looks at a limit and just says, okay, that's a capability gap. It's not an indictment of your character. It's just data. It's the starting point for learning.
So reframing limits from something to be embarrassed about into just a piece of information, that is a powerful shift. It's actually a form of strength, isn't it?
A huge form of strength. And the sources have this perfect, this really memorable way of summing it all up. Humility is the art of standing tall, but never standing above.
I like that. Standing tall, but never standing above. That really captures it because it connects owning your strengths, your height, with respecting everyone else around you.
It does. And that imagery is a great bridge to this powerful metaphor our sources use. It's from Asian folklore, and it really helps make this whole idea of balance feel, well, real.
Okay, so we're moving from the philosophical to the biological.
Exactly. The sources bring up this old saying, I think it has roots in Myanmar, that compares two plants, the stiff, brittle tree and the bamboo.
The bamboo.
Yeah, the saying goes, the bamboo bends with the wind but never breaks. And that gives us this perfect visual model for what humility looks like under pressure.
So the bamboo represents humility. It's strong, it's rooted, it grows fast. But when a storm comes, it doesn't fight it. It bends.
It bends, and that bending is key. It means humility listens, it adapts, it survives precisely because it's flexible. It doesn't deny the reality of the storm, it works with it. And that's what ensures its survival.
And the opposite of that is the arrogance model, the stiff tree.
Right. The tree that looks so impressive at first, it stands rigid, tall, unyielding. It just projects total confidence.
But that rigidity is mistaken for strength.
That's it, exactly. When the real storm hits, that rigid structure has no way to deal with the stress. It just stands there taking the hits until it just snaps. Its inflexibility is what destroys it.
So it raises a really good question for anyone listening, right? In your own life, are you building yourself to be rigid and brittle or adaptable and resilient?
That's the core question.
Because that rigidity might look good when things are calm, but resilience is the only thing that actually works when, a project goes wrong or the market changes.
Which leads us right into the practical payoffs. Because this isn't just a nice idea, it's a toolkit for success.
Especially when it comes to learning.
Oh, absolutely. There's a direct mechanical link between humility and having a growth mindset. Humility keeps you open because it destroys the need to pretend you already know everything.
I've heard this explained with the cup analogy. If your cup is already full of your ego and what you think you know,
There's no room for anything new to be poured in. Humility is what empties the cup. It creates the space you need to actually grow.
so the arrogant person is busy defending what they already know.
Defending the perimeter. While the humble person is just hungry. They're out there actively looking for feedback, searching for the very information that might prove them wrong.
Which means you're more likely to ask that stupid question that actually turns out to be the most important question in the room.
Yes. The cost is a moment of discomfort, but the payoff is you actually learn something. And that learning benefit spills over into the social side of things, into our relationships.
You mean trust.
Exactly, trust. Think about it. If you see your boss admit they don't have the answer, or a coworker says, "My mistake, I messed that up," what does that do to the team?
It changes everything. It makes it safe for everyone else to be vulnerable too.
It becomes the engine of psychological safety. It lets you genuinely listen to other people's ideas, whether they're an intern or a senior VP. When you show you respect the idea, not the title, you build incredible trust, and trust is the currency of a good team.
And what about failure? How does this change our relationship with, the inevitable setback?
Well, if your identity is tied up in being the person who's always right high arrogance, then failure is devastating. It's a personal attack. The stiff tree snaps.
Their ego is destroyed.
Right. And you either crumble or you start blaming everyone else.
But if you approach that same failure with humility,
It's totally different. The failure isn't a judgment on you, it's a data point. Your brain immediately shifts into analysis mode. Okay, what did I miss? What can I learn from this? How do we adapt?
so failure goes from being a dead end to just a speed bump. A really valuable, if sometimes expensive, speed
Right.
bump.
That's a great way to put it. It allows for that rapid iteration you see in all high-performing people and teams. They're not successful because they never fail. They're successful because they have the humility to learn from failure faster than anyone else.
Okay, this all makes sense in theory, but let's make it really practical. How does this actually show up in the real world, like in an office or a community?
That's the right question, because humility has to be practiced. It can't just be an idea. And the place it makes the biggest difference is in any kind of hierarchy.
You mean with leadership?
Yeah. The sources draw this really sharp line. Arrogant leaders control people. Humble leaders empower them.
And why is that?
The arrogant leader hoards power because they're afraid. They're afraid that if they share it, it'll expose what they don't know.
But the humble leader.
The humble leader gives power away freely. They're secure enough to know the team's collective brain is way smarter than their own. They actively try to make everyone around them better because that serves the ultimate goal.
I think I read about a study in our sources where leaders ran meetings where they literally weren't allowed to speak for the first hour.
Yes, a forced humility. And what happened was innovation from junior staff just shot through the roof because they finally felt safe enough to speak up.
And you see this with teachers too, right? The best teachers are the ones who admit they're still students themselves.
Exactly. The moment an expert says, "Wow, I just learned something new from you," that vulnerability builds a bridge. It creates profound trust.
So if you scale that up from one leader to a whole company culture, you get these environments where wisdom is shared, not hoarded.
Right. Hoarding knowledge is just an act of insecurity. You're trying to protect your status. But sharing it, admitting the best idea, might come from the quietest person in the room. That's the ultimate act of confident, humble leadership.
The sources had a great example. I think it was a fictional CEO dealing with a product recall.
Oh yeah, the arrogant CEO blames the engineering department and fires someone.
While the humble one brings everyone together and asks, "Where did I fail to empower you to catch this earlier?"
One response leads to fear and damage control. The other leads to real learning and systemic change. It's the brittle tree versus the bamboo right there in the boardroom.
So when we pull all of this together, from the definition of balance to these real-world examples, what's the big takeaway?
I think the synthesis brings us back to that foundational analogy from the text. Humility is the soil where trust and growth take root.
The soil.
Yeah. If the soil is arrogant and rigid, nothing sustainable can ever grow there. It doesn't matter how much talent you plant. Humility is what makes the ground fertile for long-term success.
It's amazing. We started this conversation talking about a world obsessed with loud voices, and we've ended up in a place where the quietest strength, just knowing yourself accurately, is actually the most powerful.
It really is.
True strength whispers, I guess. It doesn't need to shout.
And, as we wrap this up, the source material leaves us with one last, really provocative thought. It says that, at its core, humility connects us to something larger than ourselves.
That's a big shift from personal gain to something else.
Exactly. It forces you to realize you're just one part of a much bigger story, a team, a community, a field of knowledge. And in that story, it's listening and learning and lifting others up that actually makes the whole thing stronger. It turns out the quiet path can lead to the deepest impact.
A really profound place to end. The idea that maybe your greatest contribution comes when you stop trying to be the main character. We'd encourage you to think this week about how you can stay rooted, like that bamboo, and let a little more humility guide your steps. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.